The first thing you must do when using Posture Pro is select the database language settings. If you are using English or a European language, select the button that says ASCII on it. If you are using an Asian language like Korean or Japanese, select the button that says double byte. This will format your database to use those languages. For more instructions, refer to the Posture Pro instruction manual.
At the main screen of Posture Pro, the first thing you need to do is add a record. Click on the Add Record button and enter the person's first and last name. You can also enter any additional notes or ID numbers that you may want to provide for that patient, and then simply click on Create. The person's name now is entered in the patient database. You're ready to do a posture analysis now, and you do that by simply clicking on Posture Analysis.
What you're looking at is the main screen of Posture Pro, where you can store all the records for clients. The important button is really the green button that says Posture Analysis, and that takes you to the working screen of Posture Pro, where you can capture images, import them into the analysis screen. With Posture Pro, you really can use any type of digital camera, but taking the picture can be important. We prefer that you turn the camera sideways, turn it 90 degrees, so that it's up and down and taking what's known as a portrait mode picture, where the viewing screen is taller than it is wide, and that's the same format as the human body, taller than it is wide. So you'll turn the camera sideways, and Posture Pro has a feature in it that will automatically rotate the picture so that the person's standing up and down, and it fills in most of the image on the screen. I'm first going to bring in a lateral picture. In Posture Pro, when you click on the Import button, asks you for a location. Where are these pictures located? Now, the easiest way to do the pictures is to take the posture picture, remove the media card from the camera, and insert the card into a card reader that's either built into your computer or a USB card reader. Posture Pro always looks for a drive letter, and if you can see on the left-hand side under Computer, it shows the different drive letters that are available. One of those will be for that removable card, and you simply drill down to where the pictures are, and when you select the picture to import, Posture Pro will remember that location and will always go looking in that last location first for the next image you want to bring in. You can also attach the camera directly to the computer. That's a little more time consuming actually. The easiest way is how I described: remove the media card, put it in the camera, bring the picture into the analysis screen, and it looks like the screen looks right now. The lateral posture is the picture where we can generate a person's posture number, and I'll go into more detail about that in just a bit. The Posture Pro wants to look for deviations from normal of 5 anatomical landmarks, and I've marked them here with red dots, and those points are the center of the ear, center of the shoulder, center of the hip, center of the knee, and just in front of the ankle. A plumb line that you drop down should pass through those 5 anatomical landmarks in a normal neutral posture, meaning no deviations. As these deviations occur, they give us an insight into mechanical stresses that are being added to the person's body. And Posture Pro will also make physics calculations to show you what those additional forces are. And to generate a person's posture number, we come over to the left-hand side of the screen and click on the big button that says Get Posture Number. Posture Pro will zoom in to where it thinks the first point should be, and that's the center of the ear. You make one click on that, and Posture Pro jumps down to where it thinks the next point should be, and you'll click on the center of the shoulder, center of the hip, knee, and just in front of the ankle. When you're done, Posture Pro connects all those lines and creates some calculations and creates the person's posture number, which we see on the extreme left-hand side as a posture number of 20. Now remember, a normal neutral posture would be 0. So the concept to keep in mind is as the posture number elevates, so do the additional stresses being placed on the person's body. And I'll identify these stresses now. We see, starting at the top, that the head is 12 degrees over center, and the center in this case being the shoulder. So we're interested in the position of the head over the shoulder, and that's 12 degrees. Posture Pro, if you set the system for absolute measurements and calibrate it, it will convert the degrees of offset into inches of travel, and that's the light blue box below the 12 degrees. So we've got almost 2 inches of forward head travel. In the box below that in red, Posture Pro is actually calculating the pounds of tension pull in the muscles in the back of the neck. Now, Posture Pro, in this latest version, I've created some drawing tools that you can use to enhance the report to your client of what you're seeing on the screen. And you can do that by adding marking tools or drawing straight lines or drawing freehand lines. But for example, you can put a marker here when you're explaining the tension and point to where that tension is. Or you could circle it, or you could put a number marker there. But there are many ways to enhance what you also see on the screen with these new drawing tools. So we've got 56 pounds of tension pull that is affecting the person's muscles in the back of the neck simply from that head going forward, because those muscles attach to the base of the skull and also to the cervical spine. As the head moves forward, they're pulled tight like a rubber band. Now, it only takes about 45 pounds of pull to launch a bow arrow. If anybody's watching the Olympics and watching archery, that's about how much pounds of pull it takes to launch an arrow. Well, that additional tension is now in this person's neck, and this is going to lead to symptoms. It will also lead to a decreased range of motion. So it's important to be able to identify this and then to work toward correcting that. As we move downward toward the pelvis, we see it in the white box. It says 4 degrees. That's 4 degrees of forward pelvic tilt. And you can see that in the picture. If I was to draw a straight line, we would see that the pelvis would be tilt in this kind of fashion as opposed to being level, which it should be. So we've got a 4 degree of pelvic tilt. The importance of that is that it will jam the low back. It will increase the curve in the low back and create problems of dull low back pain, again restricted range of motion. The pelvic tilt is also important because of what it does to the quads and hamstrings. The hamstrings will be pulled taut and stretched and become weak, and the hamstrings in front will shorten and become weak. So far in this posture profile of 20, we've seen problems that will affect the neck, the mid-back, the low back, and down into the legs. It also affects the range of motion of the shoulder. As the head moves forward, we also have an inward rotation of the shoulder joints that almost always happens, leading to a compression of the chest cavity and can cause a compromise in a person's cardiovascular system. So by correcting and working on this person's posture, you can do nothing but wonderful things for their overall health and performance. A body that's not preloaded like it is in this picture. This person's neck muscles, shoulders, low back, legs, those are preloaded. So the athlete in this kind of a profile will be prone to more injuries and take longer to heal. So identifying this as a potential stressor or a speed bump to their overall progress is, to me, an important part of the overall process, and you can use Posture Pro then to also track progress along the way. One of the other physics calculations that Posture Pro makes is shown here on the lower left-hand side of the screen under an area called additional force. Now, the additional force is measured in newtons, and newtons is a standard universal force measurement for downward compressive forces. And based on this person's amount of forward head travel, we've got almost 50 newtons. Now, the conversion factor of 50 newtons is about 11 pounds of downward compressive forces, if someone needs that conversion factor. But the beautiful point of Posture Pro and all of these numbers that you see on the screen is that each and every number should be 0. And anytime it's not 0, anytime it elevates, that's an indicator of additional forces being placed on the person's body and a limitation in what they're able to accomplish. So the goal is to get all these numbers back to 0, and you can do that really by singularly tracking a person's posture number. And as that posture number diminishes, so do all these other numbers on the screen. Any questions so far?
Yeah, Doctor, I have a quick question. Do you typically take the picture with their shoes on?
That's a really good question. The answer is it's completely acceptable to have their shoes off, unless it's clear that the shoes that they're wearing are shoes that they wear on a regular basis. It's their everyday knock-around shoes, and those shoes have a wear pattern that now matches their feet, if that makes sense. But if you don't want to worry about the shoes, perfectly fine to remove them when you take the picture. If they're taking a picture with high heels, for example, that's a clear no-no. You don't want to do that. But if it's a low-heeled shoe that appears to be something that they wear all the time, and you can even ask the client that question, or you can eliminate that and just have them remove the shoes. What is important, of primary importance in taking the picture, is that the person holding the camera is as perpendicular to the client as possible. And your focal range is really going to be in this area, or maybe even a little bit higher, right in here. So that's where you would like the center of the lens to be, and you'll walk up or down, walk either toward or away from the person so that they're framed in it. You don't want too much room at the top or too much at the bottom. And you want the person to be standing as sideways to the camera as possible. One of the suggestions that I make is that you put 2 pieces of tape on the floor. One piece of tape will be at 90 degrees to the wall, and the other piece of tape will be parallel to the wall. So a person will toe up to either of those lines depending on if you're taking a lateral view or an A to P or a front-facing view. And then you'll have a spot where you always take the picture. Because if you're standing too much to one side or the other when you take the picture, or they are rotated, it really destroys the relationship of the anatomical landmarks to the plumb line that Posture Pro generates. Any other questions?
Yeah. Where did you go to pull up the tools box with the lines and the angles and the arrows?
It's in the upper right-hand corner next to this backpack. So you simply click on that and it'll open the tools. And anything that you create on the screen will print on the report and save it for future reference. Posture Pro also has 4 different angle generating tools that can be used to do other types of measurements, like range of motion. If you wanted to know the range of motion of the person's neck and were aware of how to do that, you could actually then track range of motion and see the progress in it as the sessions progress. Any other questions? Okay, we'll move forward from this screen, and we'll show you how to do the front-facing analysis or the A to P analysis in just a second. But I wanted to leave this screen and go to what we call the stress screen, and that's accessed by pressing the View button over on the left-hand side where the control buttons are. And when you click on the View button, that takes us to a stress screen, which shows the client that really the poor posture is not just about not looking their best, but it's really about these additional forces that affect the whole skeletal system and muscular system. And we can do that by showing the client, by clicking on the normal button, what normal should be. And if you click it again, it will show their exact results. So we go from 0 head travel to 12 degrees of forward head travel. And these arrows that you see in the mid-back, those are muscle stress arrows. And in normal neutral, there's no additional stress. The arrows are short and green. As we get through different ranges, the arrow elongates to show you the additional regions that are engaged in an effort to hold that head erect. And it will change color to red, a danger color, and show the additional forces at 39%. Those are additional forces. And again, those are also measured on the right-hand side of the screen as 56.3 pounds of tension pull, which we also saw on the previous screen. So this screen is a recap of all of the forces. We show the posture number in the lower right-hand corner, the total amount of deviations from normal, the additional forces at almost 50 newtons, the additional muscle tension. So this is a recap or a summary screen that also has these animations built in to show what normal is, what their results are, and this effects of time will show someone what will happen over time if nothing's done about the posture. Because poor posture, and this is an important concept to keep in mind, poor posture is not self-correcting. There has to be an intervention. A person will not wake up tomorrow and have better posture than they did the day before. In fact, it's just going to be one day worse. So this becomes a closing tool or a selling tool for the need of what you're trying to do for the client, is that there has to be an intervention, and your skills and your knowledge and the tracking ability of Posture Pro will allow you to provide a better overall service for the client. This screen also has a modified version of the drawing tools in this lower right hand corner, where you can draw freehand tools or freehand lines, for example, to highlight different areas, and put little markers on the screen, again, to highlight different information that you're relaying to the patient. Now on this stress view, at this moment, only the lateral skeleton is doing any moves, because we only did a lateral exam. When we do a front-facing exam here in just a minute, we'll come back to this screen. You'll see how both of the skeletons will become engaged. Any questions about this screen? Okay, well, we'll go back to the main analysis screen. Anytime in Posture Pro where you're taken to a screen where you see a green arrow pointing to the left, that means you will go back to where you just came from. So you can very quickly navigate back to the screen that took you where you just left. So we're back on the analysis screen. We still have the lateral view on the screen. And honestly, after over 16 years of doing this, and we have 16,000 clinics around the world that use Posture Pro, we estimate that our software does 1 million posture exams every month. And analyzing these and talking to doctors and trainers all over the world, I've come to believe that this lateral view that we worked on is the most important as far as the patient's stress, range of motion, and overall performance comes into play. So my main focus is really on the lateral view, but we do allow Posture Pro to do a front-facing or an A to P exam as well. And again, we take the picture, this time with the client front-facing. And that appears on the screen. And now we're looking at the head, shoulder, and hips in particular. For the head, we can select points on the eyes or the earlobes. For the shoulder, I'll show you here in just a second the exact points to measure. And on the hips, we're looking at the ASIS, which is the most anterior prominence on the pelvis. And you'll actually feel for that, the biggest bump in that area, put a dot on there because you really can't see it. Excuse me. Even if the patient is wearing thin clothing or no clothing at all, you really can't see some of these anatomical landmarks. On the lateral view, you can guess pretty closely, although I do recommend, if the client's paying for this service, that you do feel for these areas and put the markers where they're supposed to be, so that you, when you take the picture, there's no question of where you need to click. So the front exam is done a little differently. In this case, we have these two cartoon figures in the upper right hand corner, facing the front and facing the side. On the front view of the head, you'll see that the mouse arrow changes from an arrow to a pointing finger when it's on a hot spot. This will tell Posture Pro, when you click on it, where to assign the values that you're ready to capture. And the picture will zoom in to where it thinks those points should be. And we can use the earlobes. A very easy way is to just use the eyeballs and drop the crosshair right into the eyeballs. And it will generate head tilt, which in this case is 5 degrees. And the Posture Pro has calculated it to be 0.2 of an inch. And you'll see that on the left eye, there's also been an arrow pointing toward the sky. And the arrow will appear on the side that is high. So here we have a left high side, which means the head's tilted to the right. And we do the same thing for the shoulders. We come over to the cartoon figure, and when it changes to a crosshair, we click on the shoulder, and that tells Posture Pro to assign these values to the shoulder area. Now, this picture, which was sent to me by a doctor for evaluation, they put the dots on the wrong place on the shoulder. The clavicle, which begins in the midline of the chest, travels distally over to a little notch where it attaches to the acromion process of the shoulder blade. And if you palpate the clavicle and feel it all the way over to your shoulder, you'll feel that notch or that depression. And that's where you want to put the marker. That shows us the height of each shoulder. So for this example, I'm going to click on where that would be, and then click on the spot on the left side. Any questions about that? Y'all are still with me, right?
Yeah, we're still here. That looks good.
All right. So we've captured the shoulder points. Now we're going down to the pelvis and do the same thing on the pelvis. When it changes to a pointing finger, we'll come down and click on the right ASIS and the left ASIS. Now this picture also has points on the knees and ankles. I don't do those anymore because we do Q-angle exams or quadricep angles. Are you familiar with that concept?
Yes.
Okay. So you can do if you think that the issue is involved with either the feet or the knees, you can add a Q-angle exam to this and then complete the exam. The last piece of the puzzle is using an A to P connected line, which will create a plumb line in this front-facing view. And you do that by clicking on the A to P connected line. The picture zooms in. You're going to now make 4 clicks. The first click is right between the eyes on the bridge of the nose. The second click is the episternal notch. If you follow the middle of the neck down to where it attaches to the sternum, that's the episternal notch. You click on that. The fourth click is the belly button, and I'm sorry, that's the third click is the belly button, and the fourth and final click is right between the feet on the floor. And that generates a blue plumb line on the facing view. And we now have on the screen a complete front and side posture exam that shows all of the measurements. You'll notice that the front exam does not affect the posture number at all. That's because the posture number is only generated from the lateral view. The total deviation, though, in this lower left-hand corner will increase because it does total up all of the angles of deviation to show a person from the front and side view how many angles they are off being balanced. And again, all these numbers that you see on the screen should be 0. So when you're explaining this to a client and it looks a little overwhelming, you simply say, Mrs. Smith, you see all these numbers. You know what all these numbers should be? They should be 0, which means no additional stresses on your body. And you can see on your screen we've got numbers all over the place. And our goal is to, over time, get these numbers back into a 0 or a neutral position, take that additional stress off your body, increase your flexibility. Excuse me. I'm going to take a drink of water here. Increase your flexibility and your range of motion. Now if we go to the stress screen by clicking on the view button, we'll see that both skeletons are now engaged. And we can show the effects of time on both of the skeletons. Again, this downward progression is inevitable, and it has to do with the fact that gravity never sleeps, and a person's work environment, their play environment, their genetic predisposition, and lifestyle choices all contribute to these posture stressors that hopefully you're trying to identify and reduce and remove so that we can get this posture number down to as close to 0 as their body and their lifestyle will allow. Any questions so far?
The effects of time, is there kind of a timeline for that? I mean, because it would, if it's increasingly getting worse, how long are we showing them down the road when you go to that view?
Well, unfortunately, the answer to that is like asking how much is a bag of groceries. All of the factors that I mentioned, what they do for a living, because there are certain occupations that put you in this kind of a stress position, what they do for fun. When I said lifestyle choices, someone with a big beer belly, for example, can create problems where the first thing to happen is the pelvis tilts forward, and then it causes problems on up the spine. Sometimes it's a profession like a dentist or a chiropractor where their head is forward, or a jeweler, for example, who repairs jewelry. Their head position is always in a forward position, which causes compensations down the spine. So it's impossible to give a time frame, but I generally say 7 to 10 years, because it generally happens very slowly. The body's ability to adapt and compensate is exquisite up to a point, and then it begins to reach a point where it can't compensate without causing damage to the body. Damage in terms of degenerative joint processes in chronic muscle tension, developing trigger points, even developing conditions like fibromyalgia. But the general rule is it will always get worse, and how quickly it happens depends on those variables that I mentioned. Now, Posture Pro, in addition to these exams, will also generate reports, and it generates multiple types of reports, and these are gone over in detail in the instruction manual. I'll go over them quickly here. If you want to do just a fast report, you simply click on the print button, and it will assemble and generate a quick report that shows the exam at the top and the bottom of the page. We're talking about these additional mechanical forces that break down the body as a way to engage your client into the necessity of what you're trying to accomplish and the ability of the software to track progress. This is what I call the quick report. And you can print name, address, phone number at the top and bottom of the facility so that it will print at the top and bottom of every report. Again, the green arrow takes you back to the screen you came from. If you want to store this exam for later recall, you simply click on the Save button, and it will save the exam. And at that time, you can come back at a later date and compare one exam to another and show the amount of improvement or regression. You can also print a more detailed report for the client through the use of Posture Pro's detailed reports. And when we do that, when we create one of those reports, we have more verbiage, we have a summary of all of the results. Again, we have a picture of the exam. This time at the bottom we have a picture of the stress screen showing all of the numbers for the stress indicators for that client, and we also can pull up a graph representation of the person's posture exam. And again, on the graph, the reason I like graph exam is that they should all be at 0, 0. In a normal neutral posture, there are no bars, and the higher the bar, the more problematic that area is. So again, with Posture Pro, you can print out multiple types of exams. It will print out exams in English or Spanish. If we go to the main screen, we have a report here that says Report Language, and if you click on Spanish, all the reports will then be in that language. I think the last thing to show you, and I'm not sure of the importance to your club, but we do have a special backpack safety check for the kids, where we can measure the backpack, we can measure the weight of the child, and the calculator will tell you how much weight can safely be added or needs to be removed from the backpack. Don't know if that applies to you. Many of our clients it does, as they do back to school screenings, or they go into a school district and do backpack exams and have lectures on backpack safety. So at this point, I believe I've shown you all the nuts and bolts of Posture Pro and how to do the exams. Any questions at this point?
Just what are some of the other problems that you've come across with maybe taking the pictures, and how do people typically react after they're presented with the report?
Great question. First, on the picture, one of the things to remember is that today's digital cameras take enormous size pictures. You're looking at cameras that can take a picture of 15 megapixels, and that's enough to blow it up to the size of a poster with no loss of detail at all. We don't need a picture anywhere near that size with Posture Pro, and the bigger the picture is that Posture Pro has to process, the longer it takes to appear on the screen. For example, when we bring in a picture that's been formatted for the size that Posture Pro needs, it takes just just a second for it to appear on the screen. But if you tried to bring in a picture that was at the highest setting of your camera, it could take as many as 30 seconds while Posture Pro resamples that picture down to the size that it needs. And that optimum size for Posture Pro is 1 to 2 megapixels. So your camera, all cameras have settings to change the size of the picture that you're taking. So the first thing to do is to change that camera so it's not taking the default high setting and setting it to as close to 1 or 2 megapixels as the camera can get to. That'll bring the picture in very quickly. Now the reaction, how many times during a year do you ever look at yourself completely from a side view? It just doesn't happen unless you're having some clothes fitted and you're in one of those special Taylor mirrors. Do we ever see ourselves from the side? And what's interesting, and always has been to me, is the view that we see ourselves most of the time is this view in the mirror. And we may notice that one shoulder's higher than the other, or that our head's cocked a little bit. But from the front view, you cannot see any of the problems that are happening on the side view, and vice versa. But when people see themselves from the side view and see that elevated posture number, it's an awakening or an epiphany. And the question is, do I really look like that? You're going to hear that over and over again. And the pictures don't lie. They can't disassociate from looking at a picture of themselves. So that's the typical reaction. And it's an important one because it will cement in their minds that the rest of the stuff that you're telling them is also as true as this picture. And the fact that you can change this posture profile and get it back to looking like a more normal posture. Any questions?
No, I think that answered a lot of questions at least.
Well, Posture Pro should be a fast and effective way to show your client the necessity of the services that you're offering, and use it again to track the progress. So what I'm going to try to do, and I'll send John an email message, if I'm successful in piecing this together as a singular video, I'll make that available to Equinox for review or for new training. And if there aren't any additional questions, we'll end this today.
I actually have one more, Doctor. What is a typical timeline for somebody to see noticeable change? Like if they were compliant with the program that you prescribed for them, are you looking at 6 weeks, 8 weeks?
Well,
how frequently would you use Posture Pro to assess somebody's posture if they were compliant?
The answer to that is really dependent on what you're doing for the correction. And I've had a discussion with Alex about this, and the heavy or emphasis being placed on the anatomy trains concept, which honestly I'm just now learning about, and I'm not going to pretend at all that I know hardly anything about it. But all I can tell you is that for the last 12 years, we have focused on posture correction with a set of embedded exercises and stretches inside Posture Pro, accessible from the main screen. And these stretches and exercises were developed by a PhD, John Chrisman. And for the U.S. Army, he identified the different muscle groups that are affected and how they're affected, which ones are stretched and which ones are shortened. And he developed a set of 12 maneuvers. 6 of them are stretches, 6 of them are exercises, designed to correct forward head posture from the lateral view. These have become so effective at doing what they're supposed to do that I recommend that you do a re-exam in 2 weeks. And typically, just from doing those maneuvers, the client can see an improvement of 30, 40, 45% just in that first week, because it happens so quickly. And what I've found is these stretches and exercises don't interfere with anything else that you're trying to accomplish. You know, from what little I've read so far and comprehended about the anatomy trains, it's really a similar concept of tension and tension forces holding really everything in place. And the stretches and exercises that we're using affect a neural organ in the tendons called the Golgi tendon organ, which tells the body how hard a muscle is contracting at any given moment. And the stretches and exercises are designed to make or affect changes in that. So I would encourage you to at least take a look at the embedded stretches and exercises. Again, I've never seen them conflict with anything else that somebody's trying to do, just add to that. And so to answer your question, I know when we're doing what we recommend, it happens very quickly. I think the overall program, again, depending on where the patient's starting point is, their age, their ability to respond, is you're looking at 6 to 8 weeks for the total process. But the initial changes happen incredibly quickly.
Great, thanks.
Any other questions?
I have one question. You talked a little bit about the Q angle, and just kind of looking more into that. How long does finding that usually take? It seems pretty fast on the other ones. I'm just curious if you look into the Q angle.
I'll bring in a picture here that we can do a Q angle exam on. Now here we're interested on the hip, knee, and tibial tuberosity, these 3 points. So to do a Q angle, you simply click on the button that's underneath the A to P picture, the cartoon figure. And again, Posture Pro zooms in. We make click number 1, click number 2, and click number 3. And that's how quickly you can generate a Q angle. And we'll do the same thing on the left-hand side. And now we can look at a Q angle report. And if you do a Q angle as well as a posture exam, you can incorporate the results in the overall report. But here you see we have a picture of the exam. And as we scroll down, we have a special report on the Q angle showing what normal should be, what the results are from our exam, and what those things mean. Typically, you have an increased Q angle when there's been a direct injury or trauma to the knee, or we have a foot that the primary arch, the transverse arch, has collapsed, causing the foot to pronate inward, which causes a series of effects that work its way on up the body. So the Q angle, according to studies, is a direct indicator of the need for assistance either in the knee, wearing a support, or problems in the foot, wearing a foot orthotic, and can be used again immediately after one of those devices is incorporated to see what the effect is. So that's how quick the Q angle is. It's just a matter of locating the points, taking the picture, bringing it in, clicking on those points, and that's it.